G'day, Dave here, and welcome to Philippians. We are looking at chapter 1, and I'd invite you to read with me from verse 12. Paul says, "Now I want you to know, brothers and sisters, that what has happened to me has actually served to advance the gospel. As a result, it's become clear throughout the whole palace guard and to everyone else that I'm in chains for Christ. And because of my chains, most of the brothers and sisters have become confident in the Lord and dare all the more to proclaim the gospel without fear. Now it's true that some preach Christ out of envy and rivalry, but others out of goodwill. The latter do so out of love, knowing that I'm put here for the defence of the gospel. The former preach Christ out of selfish ambition, not sincerely, supposing that they can stir up trouble for me while I'm in chains. But what does it matter? The important thing is that in every way, whether from false motives or from true, Christ is preached, and because of this I rejoice." Now let's just pause and remember Paul's context. He's in chains. That's right, he's in prison. He's in lockdown. And the temptation for Paul would be to be very self-focused, to let his ego get in the way. After all, he's the one that God had chosen to spread the good news around the world. And now he's in prison. God, what are you doing? The temptation would be for Paul to despair, to think that his opportunities, that his mission, that his purpose in life has actually been shut down, to have to rethink what he's all about. But Paul's trust in God actually opens a window for him and for us to see that whilst things may seem a hassle for us, while things may seem difficult and painful for us, God continues to be at work. And God is doing what God wants to do, which is great news, because what God wants to do is to have more and more people come into a relationship with him through Jesus Christ. And he comes to recognise this, and he helps the Philippians, and I think he helps us to see that lockdown situations, and we're in one, aren't we, with this pandemic, mean that God has actually got new possibilities and fresh opportunities to make himself known. So there are many people who would be tempted to think that now the churches aren't open, the buildings aren't open on a Sunday or whenever they tend to open, Christians aren't gathering together in large groups anymore, when a whole bunch of other things are disturbed, that the church has had its day, that the good news about Jesus is something of the past, that there is no future. And yet the reality, from what I'm seeing, is that there are all kinds of fresh, creative expressions and opportunities for people to come to understand the truth about Jesus. How many churches meeting online? How many people looking in? How many people who would never darken the door of a church are now actually listening to the message? Now, God is a God who works through the unexpected. He's a God who works through tough circumstances and things that we would see as barriers. God actually sees as an opportunity. And Paul is making this clear. You see, when he's in prison, other people are encouraged to spread that word. People who perhaps had been thinking, well, Paul, he's able to do everything that he wants and he's free to go around preaching and he's good at it, so I'll leave it to him. Now might be thinking, well, hang on, if this is something which really mattered to Paul so much that he's in prison for it, then maybe I need to step up a gear. Maybe there are people who I can introduce to Jesus who Paul couldn't. Maybe there are people that you could be talking to because of the current circumstances that we're in. Paul notices also that there are some people who are motivated by maybe jealousy, envy, rivalry. Paul's out of the way. Now's a chance to build my church, to grow my ministry. Now for me to get more followers. And he's not too concerned about that. The important thing for him is that Christ is preached, and because of this he rejoices. Friends, the temptation for us is to see adverse circumstances as a barrier to being able to live out life as we think it should be lived. But that's the problem, isn't it? Because God might have a very different plan for our lives. This struck home to me a number of years ago. My family and I, we were prepared to move from Canberra up to the north of Australia to be involved in planting a church. had a team of people. We had a vision for a new church in the area just to the south of Darwin. And we felt this was God's will. We felt this was really needed, a good venture, and people were committed to it, such that some people were leaving their jobs. They were coming with us to the north of Australia to combine together to reach the community there with the good news about Jesus. And then I end up in hospital with cancer. God, what are you doing? Here was I thinking that I was going to be used by you to reach people in the Northern Territory. What are you doing? And yet what was God doing as I look back? He was giving me an opportunity to reach people that I would never have signed up to reach. People with the circumstances and the sadness of life that I'd come to experience. People with cancer. And through the writing of Hope Beyond Cure and being able to speak about my hope beyond a cure for cancer, beyond this life, a hope for all eternity, a hope that's found in Jesus and his death and his resurrection. I think actually thousands of people who I would never have connected with previously have come to hear the good news about Jesus. See, what is God doing in this lockdown pandemic circumstance? Well, I don't know, but it's good. It's very good. And we can be a part of it. And let me encourage you, if you have been gripped by this message of Jesus, use these circumstances to speak up in fresh ways, perhaps to different people. But the focus is not you and it's not me. Focus must always be Jesus, because that's what God's on about. Introducing people to Jesus so that they can have life, our hope for all eternity. Thank you.